All right, today we are diving into a really tricky and honestly an often missed cause of hip and buttock pain. It's called deep gluteal syndrome. We're going to play detective and break down exactly what this is and, more importantly, how doctors go about solving this medical mystery.
So let's set the scene. You've got this nagging, deep pain right in your buttock. Maybe it even sends sciatica-like pain shooting down your leg. The first thing you think is, oh, it's gotta be my back, a slipped disc for sure. But what if it's not? What if the real culprit is hiding somewhere else entirely?
And here's the thing we need to get straight right off the bat. This condition can be incredibly tough to diagnose. It gets mistaken for other problems all the time, which, as you can imagine, leads to a ton of frustration for people just trying to find some relief. So what exactly is deep gluteal syndrome, or DGS? Well, in the simplest terms, it's pain you get when your sciatic nerve gets pinched or irritated. But, and this is the absolute key, the problem isn't coming from your spine. The pinch, the entrapment, is happening way down in the deep gluteal space, in your buttock. And hey, don't just take my word for how tricky this is. One of the sources we looked at puts it perfectly. It says that finding the source of this pain can elude the most seasoned diagnosticians. That tells you this isn't straightforward. It's a genuine medical puzzle that takes some serious detective work. So to understand how a nerve gets pinched like this, we've got to visit the scene of the crime. Let's take a look at the deep gluteal space, and you'll see pretty quickly why I'm calling it a very crowded anatomical neighborhood. Okay, take a look at this. This diagram really shows you what we're talking about. This space is just jam-packed with muscles. You can see the piriformis muscle there, and running right through that tight corridor is the massive sciatic nerve. You can see right away there is not a lot of extra room in there. And that makes our primary victim in this whole mystery the sciatic nerve, because it has to navigate this incredibly dense web of muscles and tendons. Literally any little thing, a muscle spasm, some swelling, even just a slight variation in your anatomy can put the squeeze on it. And that's what leads to the pain, the tingling, and the numbness. Now, you might be wondering, just how sensitive is this nerve? Well, get this. Research shows that if you stretch or strain the sciatic nerve by just 12%, that's it. That's enough to completely block its signals from getting through. It's a wild statistic that really explains why a seemingly small issue deep in your glutes can cause such big, debilitating problems. Okay, so if the sciatic nerve is our victim, who are the culprits? Let's line up the usual suspects, the specific conditions that can all cause this nerve compression and fall under that big umbrella of deep gluteal syndrome. Suspect number one is probably the one you've heard of, piriformis syndrome. This is the big one, the most common cause of DGS. It's pretty straightforward. The piriformis muscle itself gets angry. It spasms, gets injured, or swells up, and it puts a direct squeeze on the sciatic nerve that runs right next to or sometimes even through it. Next up is something called ischiofemoral impingement. Now, this one is more of a space issue, a mechanical problem. The gap between your sit bone, the ischium, and the top of your thigh bone narrows. When that happens, it can literally pinch the muscles in between. And guess what's right next door? The sciatic nerve, which gets irritated by all the commotion. And our third key suspect is proximal hamstring syndrome. This is all about problems right where your hamstring tendons attach high up on that sit bone. You can get inflammation or even these sticky fibrous bands of scar tissue that basically tie down the sciatic nerve, so it can't glide and move freely like it's supposed to. So with so many different potential culprits, how in the world do clinicians solve the puzzle? Well, this is where they really have to put on their detective hats and start piecing together all the different clues to figure out what's really going on. And a good diagnosis isn't just a hunch or a single test. It's a really systematic 5-step process. Clinicians gather evidence from your story, from a physical exam, from imaging like an MRI, and from specific tests designed to zero in on the problem. You know, the patient's own story often provides the most powerful clues. It's all in the details. For example, if you say, "My pain gets unbearable after sitting for just 30 minutes," that's a huge clue pointing toward piriformis syndrome. Or if the pain is worst when you're walking and taking really long strides, that's a classic sign of ischiofemoral impingement. Next up is what you could almost call the interrogation phase. These are provocation tests. They're very specific physical maneuvers and stretches that a doctor will do to safely and intentionally put stress on those structures in the gluteal space. And if a certain move perfectly reproduces your exact pain, well, that's a massive clue that you found the spot. And sometimes you get that piece of hard evidence, that forensic proof. An MRI can give you a visual confirmation. In this image, for example, that bright white signal that the asterisk is pointing to, that's edema, swelling and fluid in a key muscle. For a doctor, that's the smoking gun for ischiofemoral impingement. And it's not just about MRIs. Ultrasound is another really powerful tool in the detective's kit. In this shot right here, you can clearly see the signs of trouble in the hamstring tendon, where it attaches. That's what the arrow is pointing to. That immediately identifies it as the likely source of the problem. Okay, so the case has been cracked, the culprit has been identified. What now? This is the most important part, right? Let's talk about the path to relief and how these really challenging conditions are actually treated. And the good news is, for most people, the first line of defense is what's called conservative care. This usually means a combination of things: changing the activities that cause pain, doing very targeted physical therapy with stretching and strengthening, and using special exercises to help the nerve move better, often with some help from anti-inflammatory meds. But what about those really persistent cases? Well, there are other options. Doctors can use guided injections to get medication, like a local anesthetic or a steroid, right to the problem spot. This can provide relief and also double-check that they have the right diagnosis. And for the most stubborn cases that just don't get better, surgery can be done to physically go in and free up that trapped nerve. And this image right here gives you an incredible look at what that surgical release actually accomplishes. On the left, in picture A, you can see the sciatic nerve being literally choked by these fibrous bands. Then, on the right, after the procedure, the nerve is free, it's decompressed. It's such a powerful visual of both the problem and the solution. And all of this brings us to a final, really crucial point from the research. At the end of the day, getting stuck on a specific name like piriformis syndrome is less important than just being aware that this entire anatomical region can be a source of serious pain. What really matters is doing that thorough investigation to find the true cause. So we'll end with this thought. If you or someone you know is dealing with that persistent hip or buttock pain that just hasn't gotten better with the usual back treatments, it's worth asking, could your pain be a solvable mystery? Could the clues be hiding deep in that gluteal space? Because getting the right diagnosis could finally be the key to closing the case on your pain for good.